fired from my family business and fired from the legal profession. So it was like, what do I do? You know?
Hello, everybody. It's Jake Stenziano, host of the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, chef, father, six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy, Gino Barbo. Gino, how's it going?
Mr. Stenziano, I'm doing great. We got a Pellegrino drinker here. We got a guy who's been making it happen for the last 20 years. I'm looking forward to this podcast. Jake, how you doing?
Doing well. Going to be a good one. Today's guest is Tucker Max, the co-founder of Scribe Media, a company that helps people write, publish, and market their books. Gino, I think he's helping us on a little something here coming up. Yep. We got a little teaser. He has written 4 New York Times bestsellers, which have sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide, and was nominated to the Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential list in 2009. Currently lives in Austin, Texas with his wife, Veronica, and 3 children, drinking that Pellegrino.
All 3 of my kids drink it, yeah.
Pounding this stuff. We got to get some kind of rip on this after the show.
Seriously, I want a few cases.
Yeah, definitely. So without further ado, Tucker, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's our pleasure. So I want to hear about the first book and the evolution to becoming a business owner, because when I was in college, I didn't read, but all my friends read your book, and you were like this myth legend guy that I always heard about. So tell us about that first book and the plans behind that and how that evolved into the publishing company.
Man, there were no plans. This was an absolute like luck, seat of your pants, bounce around until you find a hole to fit in thing, man. Like I wish I can definitely look back on my life and tell a story about how I made a bunch of wise decisions, and they would all be lies. Like almost all of it was luck, man. Even getting into writing. So I went to the University of Chicago, which is not, writers don't go to that school. It's an economics school, right? And majored in econ, then went to law school at Duke. And so like no one goes to those schools to be a writer. And so I end up getting fired from my law job in 3 weeks, 2.5, if we're being precise. And then then I went to work for my dad, who owns a restaurant company in South Florida. He fired me after 6 months from the family business. I got fired from by my own father. And so my friends are like, well, the only thing you're doing that's good are these emails you write that are funny. And I'm like, what am I, a bitch? I'm going to go be a writer? And they're like, well, you failed at everything else you're supposed to be good at, right? And so I tried to get my books published. I put all the emails together, sent them to every agent and publisher. When I say 100% rejection, I mean literally, like in the old, not the millennial or the Gen X or Gen Y, or like literally means figuratively. I mean, actually, literally 100% rejection. So I put all this stuff up on the internet for free, blew up, got tons of traction and feedback. Publishers all came back. Book blew up. It spent 5-6 years in the New York Times bestseller list. I wrote 3 sequels, were all big bestsellers. Made tons of money. It never occurred to me that I could make a business out of that. Like my business was writing books that sold copies, right? Mm-hmm. And so then but all my friends were like tech entrepreneurs, right? I just hung out with those dudes for whatever reason. Mainly because they had a bunch of money.
They had money.
Right. They made money, so I didn't have to pay for their stuff like my other loser friends. And they thought I was cool as hell. So who wouldn't want to hang out with rich people who think you're cool, right? Yeah. And so I was at this dinner one time, and this woman was like, oh, you're the author guy. I'm like, yeah, that's the only thing I've done in my life is write a book. And she's like, all right, well, how do I do it? I'm like, and then so I tell her how to write a book. And she's like, no. I have a family. I run a big company. Like I'm not doing, because I told her how to be a writer, right? Like, and she's like, I'm not opening a vein on a keyboard. That's nonsense. How do I get this book out of my head without having to do all that? Mm-hmm. And so I look at her, I'm like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yes. And so I start lecturing her about hard work, like an obnoxious prick. Seriously, like the stereotype of the elitist writer. I hated those guys, but I started acting like them. And she rolls her eye. She was patient for about a minute, rolls her eyes out of her head at me and says, Tucker, are you an entrepreneur? This is an entrepreneur dinner. Are you an entrepreneur? And I'm like, yeah, of course I am, because whatever. And she's like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, what?
That hit the ego a little bit, huh?
Right? She's like, I don't think so. Because a real entrepreneur would actually help me solve my problem and not lecture me about hard work. And I was like, oh, because she was
Dude, that's
100% right. This woman ran a big company. She had a family. Like, she'd done more in her life than I ever had. And I was lecturing her about hard work. And so, of course, I became, you know what happens. You get called out and you're wrong. You become obsessed with like, okay, I'm going to show her, right? But not in a confrontational way. Like, I'm going to figure out a way to do this, right? And so I literally went home, got on my whiteboard. I wrote down every step in writing a book. And I realized, God damn it, she's right. I only need her for like a third of the work. It's a super important third because it's the content, but it's crucial, but it is only about a third of the work of writing a book. And I'm like, all right, well, I could do, I mean, I can interview her. I can essentially she didn't want a ghostwriter, right? She didn't want to just hire someone who put some crap together and call it hers. She wanted to be all her ideas, her words, her content. And I was like, people have been doing this for 2,000 years. They're called scribes. Like it was an actual profession in ancient Greece and Rome and in the medieval Europe. And I'm like, all right, I can just do that. So I interview her, got all the content out. I didn't write it, but I got a friend to write it. And it was like, it worked great. And she paid me, like, I didn't even care what she paid me. The book was fantastic. This is how dumb I am. This is how bad of a business person I am. And she goes, that was so good, Tucker. Thank you so much. The book's amazing. Like she's made millions for a company from it. She's like, I'm going to start referring people to you. So like, what are you going to charge them? Like, so I can know what to tell them. I'm like, what? Why would you refer people to me? And she's like, what do you mean? To do the same service? I'm like, no, I don't do this. I did it for you because you called me out and I was wrong. And I wanted to see if I could do this. And she's like, okay, well, they're asking me how they can get their book written. And so I'm going to send them to you. You can tell them you don't want to take their money. And so I'm like, I'm like, I don't want. So I had a friend of mine who was working with me on another project. I'm like, look, man, do you want to do these books? Like, I don't want to do them. I got all these people throwing money at me. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I'll give you half, give me half. I'll tell you exactly what to do. He's a good writer. And so like, after about 2 months, he's like, hey man, we've done about $250,000 in business. Do you think this is a company? And I'm like, yeah, it might be. Maybe it is. That was 6 years ago. And so now we're well over 50 million in sales. We've done 700 books that are published and out. We've got another 1,000 plus 1,300, I think, in the hopper. 60 full-time, I think 200 plus freelance, part-time. So we're like a real company. We have a real CEO. I fired myself as CEO and brought in someone who knew what they were doing.
Javon, right? We met him.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cool.
So Tucker, how does a guy who has a $50 million company get fired from his dad's restaurant? I got to know that one because I worked with my dad in the restaurant for 20 years and I held on for 20 years, but I want to know why you got fired.
Oh man, where do I even start that story? So basically, I was 25, right? So imagine the dumbest male 25-year-old you can have. That was me.
Been there, yeah.
Right? And but here's what's crazy: make him really smart, like intellectually, but dumb as hell about life. That was me. Right. And so I walk into the restaurant at 25. I'd spent a little bit of time working in restaurants, but honestly, not that much. Like I kind of avoided the industry because it was my family's thing. And I walk in and I'm like, my dad's got some amazing restaurants. I'm like, he could easily scale this. This could be the next Cheesecake Factory or PF Chang's. And this, this was 20 years ago when they were not quite as big as they are now, but they were starting. And so I go to my dad with this plan. I'm like, let's do this. And he's like, okay, whatever. Like, and then I realized that all the people that work for him are kind of dumb and at best incompetent and at worst, like kind of thieves. And so I'm like, I tell all of them, like, you guys are terrible and we're going to scale this company. I'm going to fire you all. Now, come to find out, my dad's a narcissist and they were all there because they fed his ego in a really good way. They were really good at manipulating that. And he cared far more about that than he did, one, about keeping his son in the company and two, about growing the company. So I had quite a bit to learn about people and the way that emotions intersect with business. Because I thought, I'm obviously objectively correct that they're incompetent thieves. And I'm his son. Obviously, I'll win any internal political battle. I was very wrong about that.
How did you go to law school? Why law school? And more importantly, why did you write the book? Like, what drew you to writing?
Yeah. So again, the answer for law school is because I was a stupid young man. Truly, seriously, like when you go to a high-end undergrad, like I did, especially at that time, I graduated in 98. So that was before the tech revolution started to take off. And so at that point, if you were a smart person at a good school, and you were an arrogant idiot like I was, then you basically had three options. You went into iBanking, you went into management consulting, or you went to law school. Right. I actually seriously considered the military, but then my dad and my girlfriend talked me out of it. So if you're a dude and you're kind of whatever, an athlete, then that's a fourth option. And I looked at my friends who were in iBanking and they were working 100-hour weeks and like spent all their money on coke and hookers. And I'm like, yeah, I like hot girls. I don't like coke or hookers. So I'm not going to do that. And then management consultants were working 120-hour weeks and like didn't even have time for coke and hookers. And I'm like, that's terrible. I'm definitely not doing that. And so I was like, oh, law school. Like if you're that age and dumb, you just go to the high status things. You don't think about lifestyle. You don't think about purpose or meaning in the world or other people. And it's
like an ego driven thing, right?
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I was as dumb and ego driven as a young man could be. And so that's how I ended up there, which is funny because like that's actually what ended up making my writing funny, is because I just wrote about that mindset. I just did it in a very honest, transparent way and kind of self-aware, where it's like, okay, I know I'm being an arrogant prick, but this is just who I am, and admitting it. And then that's what made my books take off. The books were all emails to my friends. Seriously, like I would send, after my dad fired me, I was in South Florida, which is the armpit of America, like the cultural armpit of America. It's like all old people or young people that do drugs or Cubans, right? And that's it, Cubans and Haitians, and that's it, especially then. And so like, if you're like a relatively smart person who doesn't do drugs and isn't super into Cuban or Haitian culture, nothing against it, just whatever, and you're not into old people, then there's like nothing to do there, right? Especially if you don't do drugs, which I didn't at all. And so nothing against, if you want to do coke every night, cool. I just don't. And so I hated it. And instead of admitting to myself that I had made a bunch of wrong decisions and I was really screwed up in a lot of ways and I needed to go fix that stuff, because I was 25, I couldn't even see it. So I just wrote emails to my friends. I would just get drunk and hook up with girls I shouldn't be anyway. And I would write emails to my friends because it was the only way to deal with my depression. Because it's not like I'm going to go talk to a therapist. That's only what crazy people do.
Dudes don't talk about emotions, all right?
Not at 25. All right? No, I'm 45 now, and I couldn't be at 45. I don't think I could be more opposite than I was at 25. Like I have two different therapists for different things now. I do plant medicine therapy. Like I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. I'm up at 6 with my kids.
Easy,
like my
man.
life
You're gonna
is
slow your
totally
book sales now. Come on.
My life is so different that it's almost comical how different it is. But no, I wrote funny emails to my friends, and my friends forwarded them around to other people, and they got forwarded back to me. And I'm like, okay, people think this is funny. And then after my dad fired me, and my friends were like, you should be a writer. And I resisted it for a while. And then I realized, well, fuck, if I don't do that, I have to go be a cop or something. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, because I got fired from my family business and fired from the legal profession. So it was like, what do I do? You know? And
so Tucker, all these young Tucker Maxes that are listening right now, what would you say to them to avoid some of the mistakes you made? I mean, now that you look back, I mean, this could be like an hour and a half show, I know, but like the high level, I know I heard a lot of ego. I heard a lot of hard-headedness. What would you say to yourself, looking back at it now?
If I was talking to myself at 19, I don't think anything I could have said would have gotten through to him. I think I would have just punched him in the face. I'm dead serious. But if you are, let's say, a dude between 19 and 29, and you are able to hear things that other people say that are wise, I was not. I had to fail. I had to crash and burn. But if you're able to hear, the thing I would tell you is feel your feelings, right? And this isn't advice, but I'll just tell you what I did. Everything I did in my 20s, everything, both good and bad, was a way for me to avoid feeling my feelings, right? Like I went out and drank and partied and hooked up with a ton of girls, which in a certain way is a lot of fun. Like I'm not gonna be like, oh, it's so horrible, I never should have done that. I don't know, man. Like some of it was super fun. I'm pretty glad I did some of it, right? But I did it a lot, and to an extreme degree for way too long. And the reason was because deep down, I was very sad, lonely, and depressed. And that was a really good way to not, if you're drinking and hooking up with a ton of girls, you don't have to feel any other emotions for a while. It will eventually catch up to you though. And the same thing, whatever it is you're doing to avoid feelings may work for a little while. It will not work forever. And the sooner you can realize that, the less far down some really negative paths you can get into. And so if you feel stuck, if you feel depressed, if you don't feel anything, that's cool. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you do, then the sooner you recognize that and the sooner you start to feel those emotions, the better. And then of course, the next question the dudes all ask me is, well, how do I feel my feelings? And I'm like, well, okay, well, that's a much longer discussion that you get into, but it basically involves, there's 100 different forms of therapy, finding some that work for you.
So
Right?
Tucker,
There's so many
I would
different ways.
say coaching. I'm a life coach, a certified life coach. I love life coaching because therapy to me is always sort of looking back, right? Coaching is sort of acknowledging what happened to you in the past, saying that shit happened, but how do we create a plan for the future? It's always forward looking, life coaching. And I love that. You become aware, you become conscious, you have levels of energy, you're engaged, all of that. So I want people to look up life coaching. For everyone out there that's struggling with their feelings, become aware of your feelings, become conscious of them, and take control of them. If you feel like a victim, it's okay. But you know what? You don't have to be a victim all the time. You can raise your level of energy to the anger, to the responsibility, going from catabolic to anabolic. But it's important that you acknowledge it and look forward. Get a coach, get somebody who you can mentor with, and get into that space and start realizing what's going on in your life. I mean,
When I say I have 2 therapists, one of them is a coach. Yeah.
Okay.
He wouldn't, if I ever called him a life coach, I think he'd be quite upset with me, but he's a coach. Coaching is coaching, right?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so like,
Yes.
he is very forward looking.
Mhm.
My therapist is backward looking. The
Yes.
reason you would want a therapist and the reason you would want to look backwards is to deal with trauma, right? So
Yes.
if you had, and I don't mean necessarily, rape, war, that's serious trauma, like that's
Yes.
obvious. But then there's
Yes.
also chronic traumas, neglect, abuse. Like no one beat me or hit me or sexually molested me as a kid, thank God. But I had parents who just didn't care about me, right? But
Yes.
not in like a poor person welfare
Yes.
foster system way. I mean, my parents were white and they had money and they like middle class. And my dad was actually more pretty wealthy. Very sort of rich white people problems, but still very traumatic
Yes.
as a kid. And it took me 40 years to even see that and recognize it. And then the last 5 years, especially the last 2 or 3, I've been kind of bringing that up and processing that, right? Because in a lot of ways, your only obstacles to moving forward and growth are dealing with issues from the past that are holding you back. I will tell you, you don't need to deal with them until you realize they're holding you back often. Like it's sort of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I'm with you, right? So if your life's working, cool. But when you hit, for me, every obstacle I've ever hit has never been external. It's never been someone holding me back.
Yes.
It's never been this tax rate or this law or this person said this mean thing. No. It's never external. It's always internal. And that either means I have a wrong mindset, for which coaching is great, or I have some old trauma that I had, some old feelings that I haven't felt that I need to feel to allow me to level up. It's one or the other. That's why I have both. I totally agree.
So how's that made you a better parent now going
Oh, dude,
forward?
it's everything. Everything. It is the only reason I'm a good parent, because being a good parent boils down to really just 2 things, right? There is obviously the sort of creating a physical environment where the child is safe and cared for. That's pretty easy for almost any parent. And that's kind of the baseline, right? The kid's got to be hungry or got to be fed, got to have a roof over their head. The only other thing you have to do is love and accept that child, right? But if you do not love and accept yourself, it is almost impossible to do that for the child. You cannot give to a child what you do not give to yourself, which is why, like, my parents were terrible at being parents, not because they were mean. It wasn't intentional. They never woke up one day and was like, you know what? I'm going to ignore my kid and treat him like shit. Of course not. They never had that thought in their head. They just were really broken emotionally, didn't love or care about themselves. And so they couldn't give that to me. How could they model that, right? It's like, asking my mom, how do I build a house? And she doesn't know how to build a house. What can she teach me? Nothing. Same thing, right? And so I had to learn how to feel my own feelings, how to love and care for myself, how to emotionally be there for myself before I could do that for my kids. Now, I've learned a lot from them, and I've gotten better at that. So I didn't have to be perfect before I had kids, but I had to at least have a baseline. And so both coaching and therapy got me to the point where it was like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand my emotions. I'm starting to recognize them. I'm starting to care for myself. I can have kids now and then grow with them along with that. I mean, I can give you guys a million examples, but there's nothing, it is the only reason I'm a good parent at all in any way, is because I learned how to first take care of myself.
I got a great quote from my Uncle Vinny. So when my daughter was being born, I was asking him, like what's the secret here, to raising good kids and everything. And he said, if you want to keep them out of jail, you spend time with them. I know it's a simplified answer to what you're saying.
He's saying the same thing I just said.
He's saying in a simple way. That was his way of saying, like, you want to keep him out of jail, spend time with him. And it's like, if it's going to Home Depot, take him with you. Whatever the case is, you got to spend time with him. I think that care and that love is in some ways, translated through that by your time and presence, right? And being like not just there, but like being present in the moment with them. So.
If you asked me to sum up my childhood and my trauma in one word, it would be loneliness.
Yeah.
My parents were never around, which is highly traumatic to a young child.
The worst.
Right.
Yes.
Leave an 18-month-old in a room for 10 minutes alone. And what does it do? Starts freaking out and screaming most of the time, right? And it's just because it's 18 months, it doesn't understand, or it's 2 years old, it doesn't understand. It understands safety only in proximity to its caregiver, right? I was alone a lot as a kid. And I wasn't actually objectively unsafe, but I didn't know that. And so I had all these problems as an adult, all the issues because of that unreconciled issues, right? But you're 100% right. The more time, roughly speaking, the more time you spend with your kids, the better off they're going to be.
So 2 comments before we get to the Scribe Method. I got the Scribe Method up here. We want to go through Tucker's book. The good book says, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? So that presupposes that you love yourself first. And the next thing I want everyone on the podcast to really do is Google the word energy blocks. In life coaching, we talk about energy blocks. They are 95% internal, 5% external, as Tucker said. The economy, Obama being elected, the economy sucks, Biden coming in, Trump. We can't control that internally. The 4 energy blocks, everybody: limiting beliefs, interpretations, assumptions, and the highest one, what we call an IPEC, is gremlins. It's that little inner voice in your head. We all have that, right? I'm not smart enough. I'm too dumb, whatever that may be. I'm fat, I'm ugly, whatever that is. Just everyone Google that, because we could spend the whole podcast on that. But that's the crux of what Tucker's talking about, having those internal blocks inside of you and not being able to overcome that. Now, there's work involved. What are your limiting beliefs? When we got into multifamily real estate, the limiting belief was, it takes money to make money. I can't get into multifamily because I don't have enough money. That's a load of crap, because you can use other people's money. You can syndicate, you can partner. Once you crush that limiting belief, ciao, see you later. On to the next one. So really important that everyone really needs to dive into that, because that is the crux of becoming successful, unleashing those 4 energy blocks and working on yourself. So we're
talking about the exact same thing. I'm just using different words.
Yeah,
literally the exact same thing.
Yes, exactly. So, but it's important because people are always out there blaming other stuff. They're always blaming everything else. And it ultimately comes down to one word in the Jake and Gino community: responsibility. If you can become responsible for your actions and for your life, your fruits are your roots, as T. Harv Eker says, right? If you have strong fruits, you're going to bear the root. If you have strong roots, you're going to bear the fruits. We don't get that because people are always out blaming others. Become responsible for yourself. So
it's so funny you say that. Like we have a very strong culture in our company, and if you ask me what's the pillar, the thing, I would tell you responsibility. Like it's why everyone in our company is awesome, because the number one thing we hire for is, does this person take full responsibility for themselves? If they don't, you can guarantee there's going to be problems. If they do, even if they're not that skilled or that smart, if they take full responsibility, you can always find a really great place for them. There's always things for that person to do. Now, it's funny you say that, man. Like, I don't even know your all's sort of philosophy. I could not agree with it more. Totally. Like, all a victim mindset gets you is victimhood. That's it. That's all it gets you. right? You see it in the world right now. Everyone on either side who blaming other people. It's like, look at your own life first.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, you realize, oh, wow, I can control almost every single thing in my own life.
Mm-hmm. So one of ours core values is extreme ownership. So we have people first, but then extreme ownership is the other one. And like Jake says, if you like you just said, if you are competent, we will find a place for you. We will find a seat for you. So important. Let's go over the Scribe Method. Describe to us what the Scribe Method looks like for any author out there looking to write a book. And first of all, I mean, Tucker, I'm sorry, who should write a book? Like, I would get that question all the time. Who do you think should write a book? For me, I think anyone who has a story and who wants to share something in their life, that would be my answer.
So it depends what book we're talking about. If we're talking about a nonfiction book, like sort of an instructional book, like what you guys are writing, you're teaching someone a specific skill, then you need to have that skill. You need to have something that you can teach that other people want to learn. But if you're writing a memoir, right? If you're telling your story, I think everyone on earth should write a book. Like I literally think everyone on earth has a story. I think everyone on earth can tell that story. And I think everyone has a story that can help at least one other person, right? And usually more than one other person. And so when people ask me that, I always tell them everyone should write a book. And you should see the looks on the faces of the elitist writer types who are like, no, books are so like all the people who derive their identity and their fanciness from books, all of them almost want to keep people the hoi polloi
chipping
out of
away at their
writing
tower,
books.
man.
Right,
Come
because
on.
they're like, if everyone can write a book, what makes me special? And I've taken the complete opposite approach. I actually think every single person on earth should write a book. It's why we created a Scribe Book School and give it away for free, right? Like most book companies charge a lot of money for their instructional stuff, right? We don't. We're a service company, and instead of selling sort of our process, we give it away for free. Go to scribebookschool.com and you can see it's our entire process for both nonfiction and memoir, totally free forever, because I'm so I both can't stand the elitist view that only the select get to write books, and I also fully believe everyone has a story to tell, right? And so it's like, all right, well, let's put our money where our mouth is. So I think everyone should write a book. The only question is what type of book and when. That's it.
So let me share this with the listeners. I was going to tell Tucker that we've written 3 books. I wrote a cookbook. Here's a cookbook right here. We wrote Wheel Our Profits, Jake and I, and then last year we did the Honeybee. And what I've learned is go to Tucker, go to Scribe. Don't waste your time. It took me 2 years to write the cookbook. And you think you're saving money. And Jake always told me, if it makes you money, it costs you nothing. And it was just a long, arduous process.
Dude, how painful was Wheelbarrow Profits, dude? We were waking up like so early in the morning, like for a year trying to put that thing out together. That thing was brutal, dude. We could have lectured on the hard work. That shit sucked.
and even the Honeybee, it was a great process. It was super expensive, but it was a good process. It was an excellent product, but I love the Scribe Method. I love the one we're coming out with a book called Creative Cash. It's on creative financing. It's been such a smooth process, and it has been so, the budget's been great. The timeline's been great. The team has been great. Tucker, how have you been able to put this together? I mean, the whole process has been really smooth. How did you actually brainstorm this whole process? Because it is getting ideas from somebody, putting it through, and it's not just a book, it's the front cover, it's the marketing, it's the layout. There's so many different things go into it. It's an amazing process. You mind sharing that a little bit with us?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where I wish I could take all the credit, but all I did.
A 25-year-old Tucker would, right?
Now I totally would have. Oh, 25-year-old Tucker. Well, I'm a genius, Gino, and that's why. And let me tell you how smart I am. All that. No, okay. So I did come up with sort of the initial idea. I didn't invent scribing, of course. Like Plato was a scribe. But I really kind of, I think, created a modern iteration and an interview process. The Scribe Method is essentially getting someone to interview you to get your book out of you if you don't want to write it yourself, right? And so I kind of updated, came up with that, really helped refine it, got us to about 2-3 million in sales, and along with Zach Oberant, my co-founder. And so I got us there, right? So I was kind of the 0 to 1 guy. But dude, the reason you guys had such a great experience had nothing to do with me, man. It had everything to do with the fact that we hired an amazing CEO, Javon McCormick, and that he has attracted an amazing team and coached them and mentored them and empowered them, and they do an amazing job. And he is, and the team are really, really good at understanding what do people need, right? What do they need? What do we actually have to do to produce a great book? And how do we do that in a way where we're managing both their expectations and their emotions through a very long, complicated, difficult process, right?
Love that.
And it's honestly them, man. It's a testament to what we were just talking about. We hire people who are very responsible, who care about people, and who can learn like that. And the rest kind of, with a good leader, which we have, the rest kind of takes care of itself, man.
Love that. Before we go to the personal growth questions, last one for me, Jake. Any other tips on scaling a business? I mean, going from 1 to 2 million to 50 million, other than like the people and hiring a good CEO, what other tips?
No, everything's people. Everything's people, man. Everything. It is the lesson that I have learned in the last 6 years, is that everything is people. And then from there, all the other lessons come. But if you don't have good people, nothing else matters. Nothing. It does. I was obsessed with getting the right process, and I was obsessed with process early on, because that was just my mindset, is process before people. And Javon came on, and I learned by watching it. It was, man, I got fired from my own family business, right? So like, I really have spent no time in corporate America. And so my assumption was always everything corporate's stupid, right? Which is like, I'm right a lot of time, but then there's also, it's like, well, okay, these are the biggest companies.
I went through the same thing.
Right. They're doing something right, you know? And so Javon most executives you meet that work at companies are actually dumb and don't actually know anything. But there's like 10% of them who are absolute ballers.
And all those 10%, they're all listening to this podcast, by the way. The 90% are not on here.
Those are the people who make the system run. And he was the first one I had ever dealt with, right? There was a true baller. And I was like, I remember working with him. I was like, at the first 6 months, I was like, my God, now I understand how companies get big and why they work. It's because there's enough of these people in them. And that was the thing that he got out of my head. Process doesn't matter until you get the people right. Then you've got to get the process right so that the people can operate in it. Like, you can't have a terrible process. Good people will make a terrible process work, sort of, right?
So,
but you can't but bad people will screw up a great process.
I gotta ask another question. How did you recruit him? How did you get him to come to the team?
And again, like you keep looking for the tricks, and I'm like, look, well, okay. So he was a client. The honest answer is he was a client. Now, but there was something. I'm actually giving a keynote at an event tomorrow about about CEO transitions, right? And one of the big things that I know they're going to quiz me about is recruiting. And I do not, I can't tell you how to go out and find a great CEO using recruiting processes, because I didn't do that. But here's what I can tell you. He on a weekly basis, that man gets 7- and 8-figure offers from huge companies to leave, and like to come in and run, like every private equity firm. I mean, hey, well, they give him Godfather offers all the time to come run their companies, and he never leaves. And the reason is because of our relationship, right? It's not, yeah, he has a big chunk of the company, of course. Yeah, like he's fully empowered. Like, he doesn't have to, I don't look over his shoulder or micromanage him, because it's like, at this point, it would be foolish for me to do. I'm like, God, he knows everything way better than me about running a company. But also, we have a very strong purpose. Like, he believes in our mission, right? And what we're doing and why. And we have an amazing relationship. And so the question for him always, when he gets these Godfather offers, is what price do I put on loving my life? And the answer is like, no, like there might be a price. Like, there may be someone comes in with $1 billion offer for him. I'll just be like, all right, let's just take me with you. Let's go, let's go, right? But like, no one's ever been able to offer him enough money to go, because it's always like, oh, I got to take over this company that I don't care about. I don't care about the product. It's not my team. I didn't build them. I built this entire team. I'm not going to have a support, a partner who loves me and who's one of my best friends and who, I'll go to war with. Like, I have to let go of everything I love to go make money. Right. And that's why he stayed. And that's why he's always going to stay. And he's
the
not
culture
going
seemed
anywhere.
very important to him when we had him on the show.
Yeah.
It seemed like very, very culture driven.
But the culture is just a set of decisions that we all make.
Yeah.
It's not an abstract thing. It's not like, oh, let's go to the, let's go to the culture, or let's, bring out the culture. The culture is what we do every day.
It's real though, dude, because like I'll give you a classic example. We had a property just recently, and the only thing, so we have, like 1,500 apartments throughout the country, right? And this one property, we could not get our culture right. And we hired, from people that were outside. And when we do well, it's when we promote from within, because the people know the culture and what works. And it's all the same thing. It's their apartments, so why can't it work over there? The people that we put in, like, for example, the managers and whatnot, like you put Javon in charge, they could not pull through the culture, and they were resistant, and we just couldn't get that fit. And ultimately that property, it just never performed the way we wanted it to. So it's wildly important. And I see companies that when they're growing really fast and they can't replicate that culture, that's a huge problem. And so we've experienced it. But the funny thing is, for us, we went in the reverse. We got the right people in many instances early on, but we lacked the systems, because I was bucking like that corporate type world.
Yeah.
And that slowed us down. So I kind of had this aha moment, similar, to use, where it's like, okay, shit, we got to get this system thing right, because we know we want to get great people, but it's a
system follows people though, always.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. I don't disagree with that one bit. I just think it's so interesting, because like in the multifamily space, getting that first deal and like buying something is always people's like biggest hurdle. But then it's a business like anything else, and the people systems and the culture follow that. And I think a lot of people, don't necessarily always connect that. So, all right, guys, we're running a bit long. Let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsor.
Are you looking for ways to improve your life?
Here at Jake and Gino, our mission is to empower students through financial education and the vehicle of multifamily investing.
Yes, Jake. We agree that a person with financial intelligence can change the world for the better.
We've created our proprietary 3-step framework, buy right, manage right, and finance right, that we teach to our community. This framework, along with education, our one-on-one mentorship, on-site boot camps, and the amazing community, has propelled our students to massive success.
We've all been there. We've had so many students that have been able to shift their mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and set a clear path to achieve their goals. Whether you're currently fixing and flipping, wholesaling, or buying single-family rentals, and you know that multifamily investing is the right vehicle for you, I encourage you to visit jakeandgino.com/apply to schedule your complimentary consultation with our team. And I want to let you know, this isn't a high-pressure sales call. It's really just a discovery call to get to know each other better and see if we're a good fit for working together. And if for any reason we're not a good fit, our team has tons of resources we will share with you to help you along your journey.
If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, go to jakeandgino.com/apply and schedule your call now. All right, we are back. Want to hear real quick on if there was a moment in your 20s where the light bulb either went off, or if it was a gradual progression to sort of responsibility in adulthood. Because, obviously you had some wild times. I just want to understand that transition, and that may help some of the younger guys out there listening as well.
Oh man. Okay. If there was a moment, the moment came, I can tell you the exact day, September 27th, 2009. And I know that day because it was my birthday, and it was also the Saturday that the movie that was made about my life came out. And it was like a major Hollywood movie. You probably haven't heard of it because it didn't do very well. And that was like,
what was it called?
I hope they serve beer in hell. Same as the book.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, remember early on, we were talking about emotions. I'm like, listen, if what you're doing is working, just keep doing it. I'm only talking to the people who are open to hearing other stuff, right? What I was doing, as dysfunctional and toxic as it was working until it stopped working. And that was the day it stopped working. That was the day I realized that, because the movie, I had delusions of grandeur in my head about it, and it didn't perform that well, which is like, on one hand, it's hilarious to think about. Like, think about this. A major Hollywood movie was made about my life before I turned 35. and like it didn't do 100 million at the box office, and that was soul crushing to me.
You just assumed slam dunk
Dude,
home run.
of
This thing,
course.
I'm gonna be like, we're blowing up
course.
even 10x, and you're yeah,
Of course,
got it.
And it was it's like for most people coming from most situations, just the thing itself would be a major celebration, and it could be. I could have looked at it like that had I chosen to, but instead, it was I was extraordinarily narcissistic at the time. Like that was my sort of ego defense for all my pain and trauma, was everything was about me. And so that movie not working, what made me really question everything I thought to be true in the world. And I could have gone one of two ways. I could have doubled down, and I could have just kept going, and just, which a lot of people do. But the thing, if there's one reason I've been successful in my life, I honestly think it's because I'm always willing to accept reality, whatever it is. You know, I may deny it for a while, but once I can't deny it anymore, I always accept it, right? And that was one of those moments where it's like, okay, I need to accept that my life strategy is not working, not anymore, and that and I need to do something different. And so I moved. It was right after that I moved to Austin, Texas, which is the most opposite place on earth of LA, and or at least in America. And I started therapy about 6 months or a year later. I changed my entire life because I realized like I reached the apotheosis of narcissism, and I realized it wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go, you know? And then actually there was another peak, maybe about 6 months later, where, because I kind of fought like the emotional thing, and I fixed everything else in my life. Like I got in amazing shape. I was like, you know, whatever, 7% body fat. Like I had plenty of money. The movie didn't crush me financially. I had enough money. I literally didn't do anything. I didn't have to do anything. Like everything was set in my life. Like I had 5 times more than I ever thought I would need to be super happy. And I was more happy than when I was poor and broke and anonymous, but like 10% more happy, you know, like 15% more happy, not like happy, you know? And so it was like, I really had to examine, be like, okay, I've fixed everything in my life externally. So the only thing left is me. And the way I think and feel and my approach to life is just not working. And I've got to start taking that long path to examine that and figure out what's going on. And then I started therapy, and that was about 10 years ago. And now kind of here I am.
So I'm hearing an inflection point and then a gradual, rise to, healing and things. Got it.
Yep.
Any habits that you do on like a daily basis or weekly basis that have helped you out personally that you want to share with folks?
Oh man, there's so many. I keep coming back to feeling my feelings, you know, like it either sounds like because I'm trying to imagine how I would hear that like years ago. Either I wouldn't know what the person was talking about, or I
That's
think
kind
it
of how
sounded
I'm
really.
feeling. I'm just not calling you out on it. Like I'm not really sure what you mean by that. To be honest with you.
All right, so let me give you a really good example. Okay, so a couple, actually, last night, my son did something. He's 6, right? He's a normal 6-year-old boy. He did something that he knew he shouldn't be doing, like all 6-year-old boys did. And he got like and I got upset. Like I yelled at him. I sent him right to his room. Like I got being upset is, or like consequences are fine for children, appropriate, even boundaries definitely. But I got angry in addition to, right? And then like I didn't really notice in the moment how mad I was, and my wife was like, and I fought. No, he deserved it. Like I argued with her about my anger, and then later on, I finally like, oh, and then I had to realize, like, okay, first I had to admit to myself what I had done, that I'd screamed and yelled, a ridiculously outsized response to something, and then I had to really then I admit it. Then I had to sit with that, man. Like, and think about like, what does it feel? I don't know if you have kids, but like hurting your kids is like, even, of course I didn't mean it. Doesn't matter. I hurt my kid. I hurt my son. I screamed at my son, and he's a sensitive kid, So like, it was hurtful to him. Right. And so it was like, and I'm not talking about holding the boundary. That's fine. the way I responded. And so like I had to feel that, right? I had to sit and accept it and then feel both the shame and the regret of having hurt my child, right? Then I had to go realize, okay, like, how do I make up for this? I've got to, we got to recognize that he broke a rule and we got to hold that boundary. But then I also need to recognize that I violated a boundary as well. And I did something that I shouldn't do. And we talk about, daddy, everyone makes mistakes, like, and so they understand like, whatever. But then, so I had to like apologize to him and really kind of own that. And you can't, had I not, and it was so funny, man, because like, he was like, he's a sensitive 6-year-old and he was like, didn't want to talk about it. Right. And then once we started talking about it, he was clammed up. And then eventually like, kind of held them. And I was like, we all make mistakes, right? Yeah. Well, daddy made a mistake. Like, yeah. And like, daddy, I shouldn't have yelled at you. And so what do we do when we make a mistake? It's one of our household rules. When you make a mistake, you clean it up and say you're sorry. I said, okay, well, I'm saying I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry for yelling at you. I shouldn't have done that. And then I felt him like he let go of that, right? And then 2 minutes, not even 20 seconds later, he's bouncing around the house, happy, playing, whatever. But if I hadn't felt those feelings, I couldn't have done that. And then that's something he would have carried forward the rest of his life unless he dealt with it another way. Right. And there have been times like I yelled at him and didn't feel like deal with it in the moment or deal with it appropriately. And then 2 days later, he's hitting his sister about something, No, seriously.
No, but
and it's like,
does
this make sense?
Yeah, it does way more now because it's the acceptance of it and it's the acknowledgement of it without just moving on with life and carrying on and saying, okay, even though I effed up, I actually did something about it. So no, that's very helpful. Appreciate it.
So Tucker, I have some bad news for you. You're going to do that for the rest of your life because I just did that to my 20-year-old daughter last week, talking about a podcast, and I'm like getting a little, I'm angry. I sort of yelled at her, and my wife in the moment's like, "Do you speak to your employees like that?" I'm like, "Oh snap, man!" And then the ego gets in, and and like, all right. 20 minutes later, I felt like such a Gabrielle, if you're listening to this, I'm really sorry, but I know exactly. It is like you just feel horrible. And listen, she's 20 years old, so I have a lot more experience, and you still continue to do that. But if you understand that, you're aware of it, and she understands, and she's emotional, and then I get super emotional, you have to understand that, and like you said, acknowledge that. And you're not trying to. I'm hard on her because I want my children to succeed. I want them to do really well. So I may be put unrealistic expectations sometimes. I don't mean to be mean or mean to be hard, but understanding that is, I think, really important. So that's an awesome story. Excellent.
So
story.
let me give you a even better example. First off, that's amazing that you're able to see that now, right? If we're talking about feelings, let's take it a step further. The question you may want to ask yourself is, why do I feel so much pressure, both to pressure my children to do well, but also what does that mean about how I feel about myself? Like, why do I feel so much pressure to do well? Where did that come from? And I'm not necessarily like, I'm not disparaging success. There's nothing wrong with that. But the emotion is like you're feeling pressure. So noticing that you feel that, right? That's feeling your feelings, number one. And then asking, where is that coming from? Because I know plenty of people who don't feel that, right? I mean, I share the same thing with you. I have the same, like,
well, it's the desire to do great, right? I mean, my kids are homeschooled, so we have a different standard. We've been homeschooling for 20 years, so people look at us and go, "Oh, they're not in school, right?" So now she's in college, she's a senior. So I just want her to do well, right? I want her to be protective. I'm a protective dad. I want her to find the right spouse, all that kind of stuff. So I want her to sharpen her game, make sure she's on top of her game. So it's coming from a place of love, not a place of, hatred. So I think that,
dude, I believe that. I believe that. The question you may not want to ask yourself is, where does the pressure come from?
Oh, for me, it's from my parents, immigrants. They were just always, hardworking. It's just about setting goals, about getting stuff done, about committing, and that was my.
You can do all that without pressure.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, for most people, the pressure holds you back. Like, you've been very successful, obviously, with the pressure. You could do more without it. I a million times I've seen this in my life where like I push hard, and I get to a certain level, and then like I stop, examine, why am I pushing so hard? I deal with something, right? Like, if you're pushing hard to succeed, when when I push hard to succeed, I'm using success to avoid a different negative emotion or a hard emotion I don't want to face, right? Like if I'm hooking up with a bunch of girls and drinking a bunch, I don't have to face the fact that I'm actually sad and lonely. If I have a bunch of money and a bunch of status from success, then I don't have to face some other fear or some other feeling of inadequacy or some shame, right? And so at least I'm not telling you anything about your life, but in my life, every time I stop and realize, okay, there's pressure, I'm feeling pressure, and then I start asking myself, where does it come from? Then I start to, that's kind of backwards looking, where I start to get into, oh, I felt like I just went through this, getting to some deep core childhood wounds. I felt completely unwanted as a kid, right? That's a horrible feeling as a kid. And so unwanted as a kid, and that, okay, well, I'm going to show, my response to that was, I'm going to show them, I'm going to be famous and the whole world's going to want me. And that'll show my parents that they were wrong, that I am wanted, right? And that led me to, a lot of success in certain ways, books, whatever, but also a lot of empty narcissism that I had to then unpack and fix. So you want an example of noticing feelings and then feeling them? That's a really good example, both in me, right? That's sort of related to what you're talking about, is kind of, okay, I feel the pressure, but then unpack, where's that coming from? Because you don't have to feel that pressure. And I am by no means shitting on success. I still do. The more I've dealt with my emotions, the better I've done. It feels weird though.
I get where you're coming from. I don't think, I think it's, I don't think you're shitting on success. I think it's just sometimes a hard thing to realize.
Because I'll tell you why, if you've used that pressure as your fuel and it's gotten you to a certain level, it is hard to believe that switching to a different fuel is actually going to accelerate you further. But just think of it like a rocket, right? It uses one booster to get off the ground and 1,000 feet in the air, and it drops that booster. And then a different booster kicks in that takes it to 20,000 and then drops that one.
It's
and then a third one.
Consciousness almost.
Right. And at least in my experience in my life, man, that is it. Dude, I was so afraid, so terrified to start therapy because I'm like, well, if I fix my problems, how am I going to be a good writer? I swear to God, that was the fucking thought process in my head. Turns out I'm a 10 times better writer now. And I'm able to build this huge company that's doing all these amazing things. I had no shot of doing that when I was at that level of consciousness.
Guys, here's the thing. I guarantee that my college buddies are not in tune with their feelings, and this Dr. Phil show is going to be extremely disappointing for them because we had Tucker Max on the show, and they would expected some juice.
I mean, so I can still talk about the other stuff.
I think it's great. Well, for our listenership on this, for everything that we do in the podcast is going to be great. But I'm going to get some shit afterwards because we had Tucker Max on the show and we had a Dr. Phil.
We talked about emotions.
It was a Dr. Phil episode,
but they were still funny. We can still be funny. We can still have fun. It's in America. There's definitely dude. I get it though.
You probably get it a lot, I'm sure. So yeah,
100%. There's a whole narrative that either you can have fun and be free and do cool shit, or you can be woo and feel your emotions and whatever.
And that's my college buddies, 100%. So
I think that's bullshit. Right? It is. It is the narrative I used to believe too.
Yes.
Man, I don't do any of that stuff. I'm not sitting in a tent doing yoga, chanting, and no, man. Nothing against it. You want to do it? Cool. No, man. I have a big, nice house with a bunch of stuff in it. This is my actual real library. That's not a Zoom background, right? I like stuff. I like money. I like success. I like to eat meat. All of that. None of that's changed.
I like eating meat too.
Yeah. I like to drink expensive wine. I'm in on all those cool stuff in life. But you can also do that and be emotionally connected to yourself and to your family. It actually makes all the other stuff better.
Real quick before we wrap up, any book recommendations? We're big into personal growth. I'm reading this Breathe book right now. And anything that you've read recently that you want to recommend to folks?
So this is a little bit talking my own book because we helped with this book.
Yeah.
But Who Not How has actually truly, I'm not just saying it because we worked on the book. It actually changed my life. It's by this guy Dan Sullivan, who's kind of like the world's best entrepreneur coach.
Oh, they're like the EO coach or whatever, right? Yeah,
strategic coach. Yeah, he runs strategic coach. Right?
Yes.
So, and then Ben Hardy, who helped him write it. So, Who Not How is such a simple idea. It's basically like when you have a great idea, don't ask how do I do it. Ask who do I get to do it with me, right? And you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it, right? Man, the idea is so deep and so profound once you actually start to unpack it. This book has, like, because I edited it too. I personally worked on this book. It wasn't just my company, because I know Dan and Ben really well, and fundamentally changed my life in the last 6 months. Like I could show you guys my calendar. I have every day anywhere from 4 to 6 hours totally open. It's why you guys got the 9 a.m. slot for, like, because I was like, Rachel, just give them any slot they want, because I screwed up the last one. I'm like, any slot they want, and she's like, yeah, right away. So I have completely full open days now, almost, and I only work on the things I want to work on. And by the way, our company's doing amazing, right? This book really explains how to unpack that and how to think in a way to create leverage, both leverage in your life, but also real satisfaction. What do I really want to spend my time doing? And how do I get there? It's not a how, it's a who. I can't recommend it enough. It's been amazing for me.
Yeah, no, definitely going to check that one out. So within our space and within our Jake and Gino community, we have a lot of folks, and essentially what we do is we create multifamily entrepreneurs. That's everything behind what we do. And a lot of folks have gone out and they've started a podcast, and because they want to reach folks and things like that, because whether it's investing, bringing folks into their tent, or whatever the case may be, they're getting themselves out there from a media standpoint. But I think the book and the podcast many times go hand in hand. So what's the best way for folks to take the next step with Scribe? Say they've already got the podcast going, Jake and Gino folks. Now they're saying, hey, I got to get that book out there for my folks. How do they start that conversation?
There's two ways. If you want to, it's honestly a money conversation, man. Yeah. Like, so it's very much what we talk about, who, not how, right? If you have a lot of time and not a lot of money, then you should write it yourself and go to scribebookschool.com. And it's our entire instructional. It's basically the exact process we use with you guys, and we just teach it to you. If you have more money than time, then you should hire someone to help, right? And so go to scribewriting.com, and then we have a bunch of different packages depending on whether you want to write it yourself, you want someone to interview you. There's a lot of different variations, a lot of ways to get to the same result. And so look at that and see what makes sense.
Very cool. G-Dad, take us home.
I'm going to try to wrap this up. This has been this is going to be an incredible story, right? At the age of 25, Tucker graduates law school. He lasts 2 weeks as a lawyer. Thank the Lord that happened, right? Goes to work.
You're in with the demons at that point. You got to get out of that shit.
Goes to work for Papa. Last 6 months there, right? So that's another crash and burn. He sits around, starts writing emails, and he figures out that he's a good writer, and his friends are, telling him that he's awesome at something. He has no choice other than to publish his first book. I mean, 4 books later, #1 best-selling author. At the age of 35, his movie comes out, and for all intents and purposes, it crashes and burns in his mind. But he's still living pretty good. Then he starts Scribe, and from a company that did 0 in revenues to $250,000, he thinks he has an idea, right? And it's an amazing idea. He was not an entrepreneur.
Getting dragged into it, right?
Yep. And then goes and hits a $2 million mark. And then he meets Javon, and he says, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to be CEO. You can be CEO. You run the company." They're now at a $50 million company right now. He's got 3 kids, sipping Pellegrinos, talking to Jake and Gino, and I think life is great. And he's also,
it's all because of Jake and Gino, right?
As he says, he's feeling his feelings. So, it's been a great journey.
Tucker, we appreciate it, man. Yeah. No,
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yep. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.